following agenda. Today we have the following agenda. We have 4 parts. We will start with a short introduction for newcomers and also a status update on the things that has happened recently in the group. This should take no more than 10 to 15 minutes. And then we have part 2, in which we have 4 very interesting talks by our colleagues. Each talk will have roughly 15 minutes, including question time. So we want to complete the part 2 within an hour. And then we have 15 to 20 minutes left for the maintenance of the recommendation and discussion on possible next steps. There are some questions here already listed that I would like you to start thinking of. So what are the new topics that we could tackle together to ease the adoption of maDMPs? And whether there are any updates needed in the recommendations that you as the adopters might have noticed already. Before we jump into the introduction, some housekeeping information. So as you know from all plenaries, there is a collaborative notes document. A link is provided in the agenda. Please add your name there and please help to co-edit the document. You can write there any comments and observations you may have or anything worth noting for others. And the next thing I would like to do is to ask you to go to slido.com, and I have like 3 questions for you to ask. These questions are just to get some background information on who you are and what you're doing. So if you're ready, let's start with the first Slido. The first question is, how familiar are you with maDMPs? So whether you already adopted them, whether you're considering adoption, just following the development of this group, interested in this topic but for the first time here, or you just came here by accident to find out what this group is doing. So I can see 2 votes and we have 18 participants. So I guess you're still looking for your phones. So we have mostly people who have been here already before, but there are still some newcomers that we would like to welcome here. 12 participants out of 19. Someone else joining? Okay, let's go to the next question. Where are you located? So where do you come from? Canada, France, Finland, Edinburgh. Yeah, it's the resolution of your answer. It can be city, country, whatever you prefer. So far, we have mostly Europe plus Canada. Okay, 14 answers. Eurasia. Anyone else? I forgot about myself to vote, but yes, the French lobby here is very strongly represented. And what is your background? And this question is on purpose left open. So how would you describe your background? Bioinformatics, the first answer. Right. Open science, computer science, and mathematics, I guess, biophysics. What else do we get? History, data management. Okay, so as usual at the RDA plenaries, it's a great mixture of different backgrounds, but computer science now and data management seems to be prevailing in this list of backgrounds. Okay, cool. You can still add your ideas, but I will now move on to the next part of the presentation. So to the introduction for the newcomers, because as the poll has shown, we have them here with us. So a few words about what this group is doing and what this group has achieved so far. and why actually we have this group. So most of you know that we have the documents called data management plans, which are required from researchers to be written when they do their research, when they hand in their proposals, or when the proposal has been accepted. And this document describes the data that is going to be produced in the experiment, the amount of data, what kind of infrastructure is needed, where the data will be kept, and so on. However, these are the documents which are written manually, and very often the researchers consider them as bureaucracy. And what we did in this working group, we looked at the way to make this data management plans machine actionable. So we wanted to create benefit for all the stakeholders involved in the process of data management, so that different systems could have provided information on things like cost, storage, license, so that it wouldn't be only the responsibility of the researcher to type everything in, but actually that we could reuse the information from existing systems and also to trigger actions in other systems by providing this information in a structured way. And we assume that we need three things. We need well-defined workflows, so being able to know who is responsible for what. We need infrastructure that supports this exchange of information, and we need a common standard to represent information. And the focus of the working group was to find a common way to represent information that you typically find in data management plans. And the working group has produced a recommendation. You can see it here. It's a two-pager document plus an extensive documentation on GitHub. And the documentation itself consists of fields with a description and information whether this field is obligatory or not. And important thing is that this most of the fields are optional. So it doesn't mean that we are enforcing specific information to be present, but rather provide a set of fields from anyone who is implementing maDMPs can choose from. So it's not a questionnaire, or it's not a template, and it's not going to replace any recommendations that funders have. It is rather a way to express information that, for example, a specific funder would request from a researcher in a machine actionable way. So our way of looking at the DMPs is that the DMPs are glue between different systems. So they must create value for all the stakeholders involved in the process of data management. So researchers, funders, but also legal experts, publishers, ICT operators, and so on. And in this slide, you can see that DMP are a central point that orchestrate the exchange of information between these different types of systems. The recommendation is currently adopted by basically all of the DMP tools to different extent. This recommendation is also used in projects which are building some infrastructure for data management, where, for example, integrations between repository systems and DMP tools are also investigated. When it comes to the group, we currently have 240 members. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the activities. We are in the maintenance mode, meaning that we are maintaining the recommendation, so basically doing any updates to the recommendation when necessary. And we also have some activities that we announce through our mailing list. We communicate using GitHub issues. So if you have any comments and questions regarding the specification itself, you can ask it directly there. And from time to time, we organize events like, for example, the RDA hackathon that we organized last year. Important for everyone, also for those who have been following this group for some time, is that we have a collection of all the presentations in our repository, which is at the RDA's website. You have to press the button of the repository, and then you will find slides from all the previous plenaries and also from this plenary. From the recent information, we have a paper published. Some of you may remember during the last plenary, I was complaining that our paper is in review for quite some time. So we eventually managed to publish it in the Code Data Science Journal. It's a joint work of many members of this working group. In the paper, you can find the full story of developing the recommendation. We tell the story from the beginning of how we made the consultations to how we developed tools, finishing with the formulation of the recommendation, and we provide an example of a minimal maDMP expressed using the recommendation. You can also find their adoptions, descriptions of adoptions, explaining how each of the systems listed here is adopting the recommendations. I would say it's a must read, especially for the newcomers, to get this high-level view of what this group has achieved. We have also two other papers which got accepted, and this is also something that has changed since the last time. So the first one is the hackathon report, the hackathon that we organized in May 2020. And the paper got stuck for quite some time in review, but it should be out in November, because we are really at the finishing line. And another paper in the ACM transactions on management information systems, which is presenting an enterprise architecture that uses maDMPs and explains how to embed and deploy maDMPs in an institutional context, how we did it at the higher education institution. So these are the papers that are coming, and that's it basically from the updates. So before we start the second part, do you have any questions? Please unmute to ask questions, or please type in chat, whatever is more comfortable for you. I don't hear any questions, so I would move now to the second part. And in the second part, we have 4 talks. For each talk, we have 10 minutes plus 5 minutes for the questions. The first talk will be by Daniel. Daniel, please share your screen, and the floor is yours.
I just got an error that I can't share the screen while somebody else is doing it, but now it works. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so basically this presentation is basically building on the papers that Thomas just presented, and on the work that went on in this working group and in related efforts, and is now asking, okay, now that the machine actionable data management plans are becoming available in the real world, what can we do with them? And I shortened this to what to do with maDMPs. You can find these slides on Zenodo. I've just posted a link in the chat as well. So the structure of the talk is there will be a summary, some background and inspiration, and then I will come up with a few things that are worth exploring in more detail. I'll repeat the summary at the end, and yeah, here you go. This is the summary. It has a number of components which I will introduce on the next few slides. Some of them you have seen already, and some others will be familiar from other contexts. It's just to get you into the mood. Okay. Further inspiration comes from the just published paper that Thomas just talked about. And here I'm particularly interested in the role that DMP is playing inside the ecosystem. He had another visual of that, where the DMP was in the center and institutions were around. And here is that example minimal DMP that he also mentioned. Then some more background is that a while ago, a number of 10 principles for machine actionable data management plans have been published at a time when the basic idea was just an idea. There was no practical implementation yet. And so what I'm going to do now is go back to these ideas and look at some of them in terms of, okay, how realistic is it in terms of what we can do now, or what could be next steps to play around with those maDMPs. And in particular, one of these 10 principles was number 6, we should follow a common data model for maDMPs, which is essentially the focus of this working group. Okay, so first simple thing, probably nothing new for people who are attending this, we should treat those data management plans themselves as fair digital objects. So they should not just report about the fair digital objects that are being created and otherwise processed in research workflows, but they should themselves be one. So, which means they should get some identifiers. Those identifiers should be of a nature that they actually might persist over certain periods of time. They would get proper metadata themselves, not just contain metadata about other things, and so on. Also important is that there should be mechanisms by which we can import information into and export from DMP tools. Then version control is important at least 3 different levels. That's the templates for DMPs, that's the individual DMPs that are actually using the templates, and it's the tools, the software that is running those templates and plans. Ideally, the version history would be made public to facilitate engagement. And also the DMPs themselves, they should be linking to the outcomes of the relevant lines of research, which is already happening occasionally. What is very rarely happening is actually that the other outcomes link back to the data management plan. But since the data management plan is aware of essentially all the things that are going on in a project, it would make a lot of sense for essentially every research output to link back to the data management plan. And this way, the data management plan could then provide a mechanism to get an overview of where a project or some other initiative is heading. Another thing to do is we should be thinking about how we can integrate maDMPs with automated workflows in general. So for instance, we could think about notifications. So let the DMPs notify those who want or need updates. These could be active stakeholders within the project, like for instance, collaborators or institutions involved in a particular project, but it could also be others. For instance, collaborators who are not involved in this particular project, but who might be working on the same model system, on the same methodology or data set or something like this. Could be repositories, could be funders, could be potential reusers. And depending on how the system is set up, they could be notified of certain kinds of changes that they subscribe to. On the other hand, we could also have notifications of relevant changes. So for instance, progress updates, milestones, policy changes, data standards, pricing, for instance, in a repository or so, or patterns of reuse. And another way in which we could use maDMPs and automated workflows is to use the information contained in them, for instance, to pre-fill certain forms, or to find related DMPs and thus related projects or infrastructures or tools or something like this, or communities. So another project I would like to basically get your opinions on, and I would like to engage you in, is let's do some round tripping. So now that we have this common standard and we have a small community that talks to each other, we have the chance to actually build a system that works across multiple, let's say, instances of infrastructure. And so I would propose that we take some DMPs from various sources, that we look at how useful they are right now from the perspective of this working group, but maybe also from a broader perspective of usability parameters. We try to import them into various DMP tools. We try to improve them using those tools to the extent that they permit it. We then try to export them in various formats. And on the way, we will notice certain problems with the tools, problems with the standard, problems with some other aspects. And so we should take note of them. We should file bugs as necessary. And then we should repeat this a number of times. And my hypothesis would be that we learn some things in the process, and which could be helpful in terms of increasing the interoperability of DMP tools that actually adopt this standard. Another thing is that DMPs could be, they are useful even if they're not published, but that, once they're published, they can have another layer of usefulness. So, for instance, if they already contain lots of things that go on in the project and pointers to that and so on. But if that is public, that means that the public others have more opportunities to engage with what's going on in the project. When we're thinking about publishing maDMPs, we should also think about how those templates, well, basically interoperate. And we should be thinking about publishing templates. We should be thinking about publishing actual plans. This should happen in machine-friendly formats. Again, as I said, the version history is important, and so we should think about mechanisms by which we can release them early and often, which means publish them early and often. Then the linking to and from other research outcomes should be reflected in the way we publish, and we should invite reuse and experimentation once these things are public. And in order to do that, we probably need to build some additional tooling, like, for instance, converters to and from the maDMP tool formats, let's say JSON, to JATS format that is used for publishing, or other formats like RDF. And if you're interested in that, I would like to discuss details. Once we have a number of machine-actionable data management plans, we can also think about how to aggregate them. And this can happen by a number of characteristics: research subject, methodology, timeline, granularity, stakeholders involved, and so on. And this then will build essentially a graph of data management, a research data management. And so we need tooling to navigate that graph and to engage with it. For instance, to find gaps in the graph, or to find common problems, or to find ways in which different bits and pieces of the graph can enhance each other. And then another example I would like to point out is, in the paper that was just mentioned, the example data management plan has the entry for ethical issues exist unknown. And that's something I think we should actually be zooming in on. So I'm in the interest group for social and ethical aspects of data, and there we're looking into this. But the general idea would be that we have learned a number of things from thinking about machine-actionable data management plans. And data management plans sometimes and increasingly also contain information about the ethics, but overall the ethics process is still largely, let's say, separate from automated workflows. But I want us to take these lessons that we've learned from the machine-actionable data management plans and apply them to managing the ethics issues. So we should thinking about verification of the ethics process, automation, round-tripping, publishing ethics statements, aggregating ethics information, and using it, for instance, to reduce the bureaucracy around ethical approval, or to raise the standards of the teaching ethics. And as for the proposed round trip of the maDMPs, we should do this iteratively and then use this to refine specifications. I have given some talks on these topics before, and the links are in here. As we refine the specifications, there are a number of things to keep in mind. So one possibility would be that we actually try to write machine-actionable data management plans to handle the work of this RDA working group, which is most familiar with the system. Then we could think about mechanisms by which DMP tools could kind of call home, phone home. And what I mean by that is they would basically ping a registry. Look, a new thing is in existence now, and there should be some sort of a controlled vocabulary to tell this registry what it is. Is it a new DMP tool? Is it a new DMP template? Is it a new DMP policy? Is it a new instance of a DMP plan? Or is it just an update to one of those? And then there are some other dimensions we should keep in mind for refining these specifications. That is expanding the use case. And here Claire will give an example of government use case, then we should think more about how we can semantify the content, because we have some structure for the DMPs now, but the content is still largely free text. And so we should think about how we can improve the semantification. And the talk by Leah and Raphael will look into this. And then we should assist communities in adapting and adopting the machine actionable data management plans. And the talk by Benjamin and Conaghan is going to focus on that. And here's my summary again. So I hope by now you've seen all of these images and they help you keep the message here in mind. Now I'm looking forward to questions and comments, and you have my contact details here. I will try to address the questions also in the Google Doc, but I have to apologize. I have to jump to another session soon, so I will not be around for the rest of the session. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your great and inspiring talk. So we have some questions in the chat. In case you may want to answer one of them, would be great. And if anyone has questions in the meantime, please just ask.
Okay. I'm just scrolling up. Funders often need a DMP and as part of a project started, but I'm interested in what solutions are emerging about where MA may exist to serve all those. Yeah, where maDMPs may exist. Yeah, right now we have the list of adopters that Tomasz has shown, but right now they're not very visible. But initiatives like the registry that I was talking about and publishing DMPs, ideally in an maDMP format, they would help address this question. Let me take some of the others. How much of an overlap is there in what DMPs can do and what CRIS systems do? Okay, some of the architecture diagrams you showed seem similar to what, yeah, okay. Of course, in a way, CRIS systems, they do some of the things because they already kind of categorize the things that that CRIS system interacts with in certain ways. The problem is that it does not necessarily talk to another CRIS. One CRIS doesn't necessarily talk to another CRIS, and also you cannot easily export from a CRIS in a way that actually makes sense to a funder, for instance, or someone else who might want to interact with the research and data that is being produced as part of a research project. But yeah, we can probably dig deeper into that. Here, someone already responded to that, so I'll ignore this. Benefit immensely. Yeah, CRIS and DMPs would benefit from integration. I agree to that. I guess that's a quick response to these comments here. I see that there's one additional new message, but oh, great talk. Okay. Yeah. If there are further questions, please put them in the Google Doc, and I'll try to respond there.
From my side, I would like to add that in the previous plenary meetings, we had some demos showing how publishing maDMPs could look like, how kind of this novel repository could be, where we could have some advanced queries, for example, trying to find similar DMPs, not only by title or author, but basically on the data sets that are being used. So we have prototypes, but there is no service that is currently doing this, exposing maDMPs. And the question about the CRIS and DMPs is, I think the problem here is that DMPs have a focus on data mostly, while CRIS focus on projects, people, and publications, but they don't have such a strong focus on data. So I think that's why this synergy is good. It would be possible to exchange information, but it's not like the CRIS has solved it already before the maDMPs. But feel free to disagree. Okay, Claire, are you ready with your talk?
I am ready, thank you.
Please share your screen. Are you going to show your slides or?
Yeah, I'm just looking for my screen here. Okay, you see the top?
Yes, it's perfect. We can see your slides.
Okay, excellent.
You have some construction work going on?
I beg your pardon?
You have some construction work going on? Because there is some noise in the background.
Yes, I know I have a problem with background noise in my system. I hope it's tolerable.
I think we should make it.
Okay, you can.
Okay, go on with your presentation.
All right, thank you. So I put the link to the slides in Google Drive in the chat. My name is Claire Austin. I gave a short presentation at the RDA plenary a year ago, November 2020. So this is an update. This is a work in progress, what we are doing. Because I and my co-authors are government employees, it's important that I read out the statement on the second slide. All views are my own and my co-author's own. We are not speaking in the role of official government spokespersons and are not making explicit comments or recommendations on or explicit discussions about Canadian statutory, regulatory, or policy matters or data. And we declare that we have no conflicts of interest. This work would not have been possible without the participation of a large number of people across science-based departments and agencies in Government of Canada. And I list them here, and I am very, very grateful to their contributions. And I should have listed this RDA maDMP working group, and Thomas also, to whom we are very grateful. So why an extension for government context? On the one hand, data need to be managed according to best professional scientific statistical practice, and the RDA maDMP is a great standard. But in addition, and we're proposing to use this as the core of a future government standard, which we also hope will be moved to the international, a wider group than just the Government of Canada. And so we invite you all with a general invitation to join in this work. Why government context? Because government needs to track things according to really dozens of legal and policy requirements. And the logical way to do that is an extension to the maDMP standard. Where does DMP, data management plans, where is it situated in the universe of all of these moving parts? It's a very complex system. And so I'm trying to conceptualize, on the one hand, on the left, we have data management planning writ large, which includes governance. And I'm trying to show how that is linked and integrated with the data life cycle on the right in blue. And what I've done is I've put the DMP, the machine-actionable DMPs, as the very first step in a data life cycle. I'm calling it a linked data life cycle because we have machine-actionable DMPs. And so the idea is, as the data move through the data life cycle, the DMPs are updated. So the DMPs are always reflect the current state of the data. Eventually, it all moves out into publication of the data, reports, peer-reviewed publications, and in government, data-driven, evidence-informed decision-making. And all of this is based on a foundation of open science care principles. And as I mentioned a year ago, I was very happy, I would say stunned, to hear the head of, I think it was UNESCO, declare that data are a human right. And that really should raise the bar for management of data everywhere. The extension that we're working on, and I say it's still a work in progress, we have 11 areas or modules, and we've also included, we've integrated indigenous considerations, which are very important also, and I believe it's important to not have them off in parallel, but it really be integrated into the data management planning and the DMPs. And of course, in government, perhaps more than anywhere, approvals at various levels are very important. So where are we? As I say, this is a work in progress. We started with the top left, adding properties and then a structure to the RDA maDMP. So now we want to develop an extension, and we developed a tool in Excel, Excel workbook. Now, I know we all realize that Excel is not the right tool for this work. It is far from ideal, but it does have some advantages, not the least of which is that it is accessible to everyone, and we're able to draw in a wide audience for discussions. And that they're able to understand. We are now in the process of developing a logical model based on what we developed in the Excel tool. And I'll show you a glimpse of that in a moment. What we are planning to, what we hope to do is develop a data stewardship wizard instance and prototype this logical model to generate DMPs. For those groups within our government who are under pressure to develop DMPs right now and can't wait for the development of the tool, it is they can go ahead and use the Excel tool to be able to generate DMPs, and then because it would be compatible with the eventual DSW instance, there shouldn't be any, or at least too much work lost. So disadvantages of Excel, we all know what those are. The advantage that we found is it's easy to understand by a very broad and non-technical audience, including managers, directors, and executives. And it's very easy to solicit input and discussion and make adjustments as we move along. This is a snapshot of part of what the Excel workbook looks like. We have 300 rows and 15 tabs. I joke that trying to do DMPs in an Excel workbook is for members of the Flat Earth Society. So we get around, nested things by using tabs, but it's not ideal. We have, as you see here, we have control vocabularies that allow us to maintain consistency and eventually to be able, if people use this in the short term, that we are able to search based on control vocabularies. My colleague, Francine Kalonji, then has been working with us to translate what the work that we did in the Excel workbook into a logical model. This is where we're at now, and you can see in blue here classes or containers that have been added in the extension, and properties with current classes of additional properties that we've added that we feel that we need in the government context. And I should say that although this is described as an extension for government context, I think that it is much more widely applicable to general users, whether it be universities or research institutions. The idea is that we're not requiring that you researchers or operations people complete all of these fields, but what we're saying is that where there is a need to track certain kinds of information, this is the place to do it. And then everything becomes interoperable and searchable and all that good stuff. Next steps, we need to complete and validate the conceptual and logical models, solicit your feedback, much broader feedback. We invite anyone who's interested to join us in this work and expand it beyond the government of Canada. We need to create an ontology, and we're having a hackathon. Federal government has a hackathon once a year, and this project is being accepted as one of the hackathon challenges. It's in January, maybe February, so in the new year, 2022. And then we're starting a collaboration with the Useful Storage Wizard to prototype this extension. So thank you very much, and thank you, Thomas, for having held my hand through all my IT challenges and getting onto this meeting. You have my email address there, and the presentation link in the book. So I hope I haven't gone over my 10 minutes.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I hope that despite the sound difficulties, everyone managed to get your main messages, that you're progressing well with your extension. Are there any questions to Claire that you would like to ask? So I would have one question, because Claire, you have mentioned several times that you would like this extension for the governmental context to be not specific to Canada only, but to be something that others could also use. So have you managed to establish any contact with other colleagues from other similar institutions or who have similar use cases as you have?
So I'm not aware of other governments that are working on an extension. If there are, I would very much like to get in touch with them. The short answer to your question is no. Other than you know, the talks that I've had with you and this group, but we would very much like this to be generic, not specific to the government of Canada. Currently, we have some fields where we use Canadian government specific vocabulary. That is so that we don't get lost in our own heads. But you know, for the final version, we want to take that vocabulary. There's not a lot of it. Take that vocabulary and make it generic, so it becomes more broadly applicable. An example of that would be where we include requirements from library, its legislation, Library and Archives Canada, the legislation. So for the moment, we are including that specific vocabulary, but I'm sure that other governments have similar requirements, and so then we would modify that language to make it generic. But for the moment, during the development phase, we're keeping it where in those rare cases, just so that we don't get lost in our internal conversations.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Claire. I think we have to move to the next presentation. So if anyone has questions to Claire, please contact her afterwards. If you could stop sharing screen, Claire, then the next presenter could start. Basically, the next presentation is by Raphael and Lea. They are students from the TU Wien who have implemented a very nice prototype. They are here together with me. So let me just start sharing the screen, and I hand over to them. This will be, the presentation will start, and Raphael goes, Lea goes first, right?
Yeah, I go first.
Okay, so Lea, the floor literally is yours.
Sorry.
Okay, so hello from my side as well. My name is Leah Fugger, and together with Raphael, I'm going to present our approach to automating the assessment of maDMPs with the use of semantic web technologies. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the background, the motivation for our work. Then I'll go through the methodology that we use for our experiment, and then I'll hand over to Raphael, who's going to present our results, and he'll conclude the presentation with a discussion and conclusion of our findings. So first, let's talk about the motivation for our work. And for that, I'll start with the given problem. So the problem is that despite the existence of the RDA DMP Common Standard for machine-actionable data management plans, there is no tool or standard procedure yet for assessing maDMPs. So manual assessment by reviewers is still necessary, which is error-prone due to the human factor that is introduced, and it can also be quite time-consuming. So our solution to this problem, or our approach to solving it, is to semi-automate this process. So semi-automate the assessment of maDMPs. And to achieve that, we developed Sparkle queries, which can be applied to RDF representations of maDMPs. And those queries collect and filter information from the maDMPs. And the goal is that the results obtained from those queries can be used to get an overview of the contents of an maDMP as a basis for the evaluation. So they can primarily help reviewers in assessing the maDMPs, but as a side effect, they could also be helpful for researchers when creating an maDMP, because they can use those Sparkle queries to quickly check whether their maDMP fulfills certain criteria. So the basis for our Sparkle queries is the Science Europe evaluation rubric. So Science Europe has published a practical guide to the international alignment of research data management, and this guide contains an evaluation rubric. And rubric can be used as a reference for reviewers or also researchers when assessing or creating a DMP. And on this slide, you can see how the rubric is structured. So there are 7 categories. This is category 6, data management responsibilities and resources. And each category consists of one or multiple subcategories. So for example, 6A and 6B. And each subcategory contains several items which describe the respective criteria. And then there's also do's and don'ts listed for the DMP. Regarding our input maDMPs, they were mostly in JSON format, conforming to the JSON schema from the Common Standard. And to make them queryable, we transformed the input JSONs to JSON-RD serializations, which are instances of the DMP Common Standard ontology. And if you want to learn more about this ontology, I refer you to the paper that is linked here on the right-hand side. So what did we do exactly? First, we mapped the requirements established in the Science Europe evaluation rubric to the fields of the Common Standard specification. And then we constructed Sparkle queries that query those fields. So depending on the assessed criteria, we constructed ask or select queries. So ask queries simply check whether a certain criterion is fulfilled. So they simply return true or false. And select queries, on the other hand, collect the queried information. So they return a result set. And this result set is basically represents a custom view of the query data. So as an example, on the right-hand side, you can see the very first sub-item of the evaluation rubric, which is about administrative information. And below that, you can see our Sparkle query, which queries the corresponding fields. So after having developed the Sparkle queries, we prepared the input maDMPs for evaluation. So we took our input maDMPs from a Zenodo community for a university course at TU Wien. And as I mentioned before, those input maDMPs were mostly JSON formats. So the first step was to make sure that they conform to the JSON schema. So some of them had to be slightly adjusted. And then we had to transform them to RDF representations. And to achieve that, we used a tool to convert the JSONs to a JSON-LD serialization, to JSON-LD serializations, which are instances of the DMP Common Standard ontology that I mentioned before. So, for example, on the right-hand side here, you can see a part of or an excerpt from one of the input maDMPs in JSON format, and below that the corresponding JSON-LD serialization. So at this point, we had the SPARQL queries and we had the maDMPs, which were ready for evaluation. So the only step left was to combine them. To achieve that, we simply, for each category of the evaluation rubric, we applied the corresponding SPARQL queries to the input maDMPs. And then we assessed the completeness of the maDMPs based on the results obtained from the SPARQL queries for each category. So for the assessment of the maDMPs, we use the satisfaction value, or SV, which is simply a numeric value on a scale of 0 to 5. So a value of 0 means that the corresponding criteria are not addressed at all, and 5 is the highest value. So a value of 5 means that the respective criteria are addressed extensively. And here on the right-hand side, you can see an example of such an evaluation, including the justifications for each of the satisfaction values for each category of the rubric. And that's it from my side. Now I'll hand over to Raphael.
So hello from my side as well. I would like to present and discuss our results. Let's first take a look at the coverage of the criteria from the Science Europe evaluation rubric. As Leah already told us, the rubric has 7 categories in total, and each of those categories consists of several sub-items or bullet points. And each of those sub-items contains requirements which should be covered or which should be mentioned when creating a DMP. And this graphic, for example, the category 2, documentation and data quality, has a sub-item that says, use community metadata standards if they are in place or where they are in place. And this graphic shows how many of those sub-items per category we were able to cover with our queries. And as you can see, for example, general information and documentation and data quality, as well as the 6th category, data management responsibilities and resources, are fairly well covered. In contrast, the 1st category, data description, collection or reuse of existing data, has a relatively poor coverage. So overall, we managed to cover 28 of 48 items. And when I say covered or largely covered in this graphic, I mean that there is at least one field in the recommendation that more or less encapsulates the respective sub-item, and that we were able to write or create a SPARQL query which extracts this very information. And the reason why for certain categories, as we have seen for category 1 here, there is a poor coverage. The reason for that is that we must not forget that the rubric is tailored towards data management plans, regular data management plans, and not machine-actionable ones, which means that some of the criteria mentioned there simply don't represent machine-actionable information, so we won't find it in a machine-actionable data management, so we won't be able to find a mapping to create a corresponding query. On the previous slide, we talked about an evaluation of our mapping, and this slide represents an application of our mapping so that we were able to evaluate some concrete maDMP instances from a Synodo community, to which we applied or to which we assigned satisfaction values, which were explained by Leah before. So we took the maDMPs, calculated the average satisfaction value of each DMP in each category and summed them up. So as you can see, there are 7 categories and the maximum satisfaction value is 5. So the best outcome we could have hoped for would be 35 in total. We achieved, or the maDMPs we took from the Synoda community totaled up to 22, with the lowest satisfaction values in category 2 and 3. This is a symptom of the fact that we discovered that many of the DMPs lack documentation about the metadata standards in use and about how they were storing and backing the data up. This is why categories 2 and 3 have a low satisfaction value. Oh, I forgot one thing to mention, I'm sorry. If you want to have more details on the justification for satisfaction values and the queries themselves, as well as the maDMPs we used to apply our queries to, you can have a look at our GitHub repository, which we have linked here in the slides. So I just want to talk about the limitations of our approach. Although the results were relatively satisfactory, there are some limitations we have to mention. For example, as I've already mentioned, there are some criteria we are just not able to cover because they are by their very nature not machine actionable. Furthermore, we had to make assumptions for certain queries. For example, the standard, the recommendation defines a host field, which is optional, which we assume to be present for the queries, which has the consequence that some queries may fail, so they don't return any results, despite some of the information which would be present. Some of the information the query aims to collect is present indeed. And the arguably most important limitation of our approach is that it's limited to filtering and collecting data. So the information that is returned by our queries still needs a human in the loop, so to say. You need some reviewer or some person that interprets whether the quality of the data which is returned by our queries is high. And to sum up, one could view our approach as a first step towards helping funders benefit from machine actionable data management plans. Because, as I already said, they filter information which is relevant to them. So you have a custom view which abstracts information away from you don't really need, and it helps them in verifying the fulfillment of some requirements. With respect to the Science Europe evaluation rubric, we have seen that they are especially useful for general information, data management responsibilities and resources, as well as documentation and data quality. In the future, we will have a look at shackle and checks, whether they can help us in modeling funder-specific requirements. We need to investigate how to or whether integration of tools that actually act upon the information provided by machine actionable data management plans works. For example, Fuji, which assesses the fairness of data sets. And finally, we plan on considering adding funder-specific extensions to the RDA DMP Common Standard. And finally, I just want to give a slight preview of the paper we have. Our talk is published, is based on. So there you can find, as I've already said, the queries, the input maDMPs, and any piece of code that we needed or that we produced in order to conduct the work we're presenting here. So if you have any feedback to share, or any ideas you want to give, don't hesitate to contact us. And finally, some references we shared or we used for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Rafael and Leah, for your presentation. I have not been monitoring the chat, so if there are any questions, please ask them now to the presenters. Okay, I don't hear anyone saying anything out loud, so let's move to the next presentation because we still have half an hour. So I would like to welcome our colleagues from France. Please share your screen and start your presentation, please. Okay, you're on. We cannot hear you only, but I guess this will change.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, can you see my screen?
No, it's black. It's loading.
I try again. Okay, here we go.
Now it works.
So hello, everyone. So I am Konigan Bori, and I am here with Benjamin Ford to talk about machine-actionable DMPs for life sciences and the integration of DMP OPDOR in the French infrastructure landscape. So DMPs represent a wealth of information for all involved parties. So researchers, bioinformatics platforms, DMP hosts, funders. But the issue is how can we exploit this information? So the goal of our project is to transform the DMP file into a machine actionable data structure and to integrate in the French bioinformatics landscape. So I am part of the GenWest team. We are located at the IRESA lab in Rennes. We are a bioinformatics facility giving access to informatic tools to researchers. We are part of the EFB and we offer several solutions to researchers, such as a cluster, a web portal to access tools from Galaxy, and a virtual environment using GenoStack. And we also have tools for collaboration.
A bit of context about DMP OPDOR. So DMP OPDOR is an online tool allowing drafting of DMPs for researchers. It is based on DMP roadmap. We are currently running the version 2.2, but it has been adapted to meet needs from the French community. First of all, we have a research output support since July 2019. We did some changes to allow easier use of templates, such as we redesigned the plan creation wizard. And we did some changes for compliance with GDPR or edition features. And our community is growing each day. And as you can see, we have some numbers about the use of DMP OPDOR. And now I will show you a demo of our machine actionable DMP features. So Konolan, if you let me share my screen. Is it okay for you?
Yes, it works.
Okay. So here we have the interface of DMP OPDOR. Keep in mind that everything you will see in this presentation, every forms, every data in the forms are saved as JSON data, and each forms is piloted by JSON templates. You can see a bit more details in our slides. We won't have time to talk about it now, but you can see a bit more information in our presentation. So first of all, we have here two kinds of information about the project and information about the plan. About the project, we have a lot of information, such as the project titles, the information about the funding of the project, some information about the project coordinator. And if you click here, you can search for your project. This list is built from data taken from the DataGouv website, which is a French website with all the public data. And all the data that is shown here is data from our National Research Agency, sorry. And if I want, I can look for the maDMP for LS projects. If I click here, it will ask me if I want to import the information of this project in maDMP. So I click OK. As you can see, there's a lot more information in maDMP. So I have a new title, the acronym. There's an abstract about the project. There's some information about the funding of the project, that it has been funded by the French National Research Agency. Here it is the grant ID. If I click on this icon, you can see a bit more information about my project. As you can see, here we have a registry that contains some other funders. For example, I can select the French National Research Agency. Here we have a partner for this project, so it's the place where I work. And here we have a new project coordinator, which has been added to the DMP. We have a new tab which is called contributors. It's changed from the roadmap contributor tab. It uses our data, our data, but not the data from DMP roadmap. As you can see, there's a new person. This tab lists all the persons added to the DMP, which participate to the DMP and the research project. And for each of these persons, you have the role in the project. As you can see, I have the research output tab with two research outputs, one for two things that I will show. If I go into the right plan tab, as you can see, there's some question. The template that I am using is based on the Science Europe template. And we just plugged our forms on the Science Europe project template, sorry. I will go directly to the question about data storage. So if I open this form, as you can see, there's a lot of information that can be filled. But by default, you can use the standard form, but if you want, you can take the form, for example, here it's the GenC, which is a French storage infrastructure. So I will use the GenC form. I can create a new, here you can enter new information specific to the GenC, which is a request for data storage. So I can create this request. I can ask for working directory at Idris with 10 terabytes of data at the start of the project, and after 1 year, 100 terabytes. Creating two. I can create another request for secured storage at the CNES, for example, for 1 terabyte and 100 terabytes after 1 year, and submit. As you can see, there's two requests here. I can go into this this tab here. This tab exists in DMP roadmap. It's the command tab, but here we can close it and open it. we have a new tab here, which is called runs, where you can choose to execute some external process, such as computing the storage costs. So when I click this button, it will take all the requests that are declared here and compute the price of the estimated price of the storage. As you can see, my form has been updated with the storage costs. So you can see the 1,000 euros here and the 100 euros there. I can go into another research output. So here I'm in the Demogen-C research output. There I can go on the Demogen West research output. I open this tab. As you can see, I already declared a number of information. So I'm using a resource identification called GenWest. There's a backup policy for this form that is already pre-filled. And there's a request that has been declared too. So I want a cluster. The end of the storage is in 1 year. If I want, I can put someone in charge. So, for example, this person, I save. And similarly, you can run, you have an external process here, which is notify GenWest. And when I click on this button, an email will be sent to the GenWest team. And in this email, you can see all the information about this request and a link to the DMP that can be used by the GenWest team to get data from this DMP. And finally, let's not forget the JSON exports. We've added 2 JSON exports, the default export, which is based on our structure, and the RDA Common Standard exports. I have an example here. I'm not sure. Let me zoom in. As you can see, there's a lot of information that can be extracted from the DMP because everything is saved as JSON in maDMP. So I can extract a lot of information. I will give the hand to Konogan.
Thanks, Benjamin. So if everyone can see my screen all right. So now that we have filled the DMP, we can start working with the GenWest services. So what we need first is to have an account. So I have already created an account for researcher. So when you create an account on our services, you already have some space to work with, but when you're working with huge volumes of data, you need to ask for projects, which will allow the administrators to manage and monitor all the resources are used. So to do that request, you need to give some basic information about your project, such as the name, the estimated size of the project, how much CPU per hour will be used, who will be financing the project, and a short description of it. But instead of having to write all of this by hand, you can just give the ID of your DMP from DMP Opidor. And yes, my bad, it's not a good ID. Okay. And you can see here that we have imported all the project informations from the DMP. So we have this information, but at the same time, the project will always be linked to the DMP. So we will be able to access information from the DMP once again later on. So here I am sending the request to the admins, and I will now log in with the admin account. So here I can see that we have 2 pending projects. So we have our projects, machine-actionable DMPs for life sciences here that we just asked for. So we can see that it is linked to a DMP. And at the same time, we also have a legacy project here. So that means that this project, the informations for this project have been filled only by hand. I will not be linked to a DMP. So at the beginning, with these two systems will have to coexist. But of course, at the end of the day, we want to switch to linked DMPs for our projects. So we can, if needed, edit the request. For example, if we think that they're asking for too much at the beginning, we can lower the volume of data, or increase it if we think that it is possible, and then we can accept it. Then during the project, we will be able to see the basic information about the project, but at the same time, since it is linked to the DMP, we will be able to access the DMP from DMP OPDOR. For example, if we are reaching the end of the project and we are wondering if a long-term storage solution has been found for the data, instead of having to ask the researcher if something has been found, we can just look inside the DMP if this information has been given. So to conclude, here in this demo, we showed you how we could fill the DMP by getting most of the project information from the INA, and how we could get the project going on a bioinformatics platform such as GenWest. But this is just a first step. So the next step will, as was shown in the demo, we are able to export or DMPs using the RDA formats. But what we'll also want to do, and we'll soon be able to do, is to import DMPs using the RDA format inside DMP OPDOR. We also want to have a bidirectional data transfer. That is the core of the project at the end of the day, because for now we are able to extract information from the DMP as a platform, but during the project we also want to be able to push updates to the DMP. For example, if more storage space is needed and if the project evolves during its life, we will be able to push that update instead of having the researcher go back to his DMP and change everything by hand. What we also want to do is to integrate DMPs in SICK. So SICK is a tool to manage experiences and projects in research. And we also want to have this bidirectional data transfer. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks a lot. This was a great presentation, a great demo. You have made a lot of new features since the last time I have seen your tool. Are there any questions from the participants? We can allow one question. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't hear anyone speaking. We have 10 minutes left and I still have some housekeeping to do. So let me move to the next part of this meeting. Let me share my screen. So since we have 10 minutes left, I will quickly rush through this part, basically the maintenance of the recommendation. And I just want to let you know that the way we communicate always is using the GitHub issues. So if there is anything when you're implementing the standard that doesn't work or makes no sense or needs improvement, let us know if there is something like this. And also please comment existing issues because your opinion matters. We cannot do the arbitrary decisions, we meaning chairs of the working group, whether something makes it into standard or not, without having a feedback from you. This is really, really crucial from you. The next thing I would like to point out is that we have the list of pending adoptions in one of the issues on GitHub. If your tool, if your integration, if your adoption based on the recommendation is not there yet, please comment and we'll include it in our list of adoptions. One other thing we've been working on at this working group was mapping of maDMPs to funder templates. We have made quite a lot of work to map these templates, but we have never wrapped up this exercise. We have defined a proposal for changes in the standard and for a funder extension that would be common for all funders. but we have never finalized this. So if you want to add comments on that, and if you want to help us pull it over the finish line, then please have a look at this document and the links I have in here. If there is anything else you would like to report on the recommendation and the improvement needed, please say it right now, add in the notes, add in the issues. If not, then that's also great, because it means the recommendation works. And this means I can move to the next part, meaning the part 4. And I have some questions to you, so you can get your mobile phones ready, because I will be asking you to join another Slido soon. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your opinion about the community of practice? This is something I was already checking with you during the last plenary. So the idea is that the community of practice is a new type of group, I would say, at RDA. And there it seems like we would be fulfilling the right criteria of creating a community of practice for machine-actionable data management plans. So this would be a forum for discussion on how all these adoptions are happening, and a way to exchange information, but also to build maybe some of the services together. So maybe if we want to build something that helps us share or expose the DMPs, maybe we can create such a service together instead of doing it alone. What do you think about it? Would you be interested? Can you help in establishing a community of practice? This is a question to you, and please speak if you have any thoughts about community of practice. But also in the meantime, join the Slido. There is a new number, because there is exactly a question I'm asking about this in Slido right now. So you can answer in Slido by voting, but you can also say what you think about it right now. If I still have you here. Good, someone is not sleeping. We have one person who answered. So far, 2 answers. 3. We can make 10 answers. We have 20 participants, so I hope at least 50% of people are not sleeping. So I see that we have people who are quite optimistic about it. Excellent idea is winning, and you can help setting it up. Happy to join once established. It's a good idea. And nobody so far believes it's a bad idea, but we only have 7 votes. We can do better, guys. Join Slido. There is nothing to win in this contest, but your opinion matters. It helps us basically to identify the next steps for this working group. Okay, so I see we have 10 votes. So in general, the interest is there. Good. We don't have much time to discuss, so I would like to jump to the next thing. I want to get your opinion from you. Is the idea of having a second hackathon on maDMPs. So at the beginning, Daniel was saying that it would be good, for example, to do this round tripping of maDMPs exchanged by different tools. In 2020, we had a very nice hackathon, and I think it's a very good idea to get together and get some work done. Maybe you can test new ideas. I think it was also good for onboarding newcomers, so that they can talk to people who are a little bit more experienced, to find out how maDMPs really work. So the question to you is, should we organize the second hackathon on maDMPs? And yeah, what do you think about it? And by asking this question, I don't have in mind any specific venue or any specific event. This is basically really a bottom-up, in this case, setting. And if there is a big interest in having something like this, we can basically start looking for a proper setup. So one of the things that are kind of interesting to me is you can select here multiple answers. Is one, whether you're interested. Second one, whether you prefer a virtual one or in-person one. If you're okay, if you're of course in favor of having one. Okay, so I see that the virtual hackathon is definitely way more interesting for you than the one in person. Cool. So if you are so much into the hackathon because nobody said no, then the next question is, what would you like to work on during the hackathon? And this is an open question, so you have to type in something. So the last time we worked on the integration of tools, we worked on integration of DMP tools with repositories. So we did the funder template mapping. We did we developed the ontology for maDMPs. So is there anything specific you would like to see as a topic of the hackathon? I know that this is a bit surprising that I'm asking this right now. Modeling more DMP information as extensions. This could be a relevant thing because the maDMPs were meant as a minimum common information. We already have identified that some extensions for funders could be relevant. Anything else? Okay, yes, extensions, the answer. Good, you can add your ideas later after the meeting if you want to the meeting minutes. So there's a comment extent what is considered as minimal. So this is always a matter of a consensus within the community. If we identify that something should go into the core of the standard, this is possible. You only have to keep in mind whether the changes are breaking or not breaking the compatibility, backwards compatibility, and if it's, for example, worth to sacrifice the backwards compatibility. But this is the place to discuss it, this group. Good, let me move to the next question. This is the last question in this Slido, and this is just like kind of any other business. So in general, what can we do to support adoption of maDMPs? What are the interesting use cases for you? What should we focus on? This is kind of a wish concert, so please write anything that comes to your head. And of course, you feel free to unmute and speak. Provide value to the researchers. Can you be more specific? You mean like, for example, coming up with some, let's say, success stories explaining to researchers the benefit of maDMPs, or are they building the tools that create the value to the researchers? Integration in the research workflow. Use case, creating a DMP from several DMPs, that is modularity. Better embed them in tools. Okay, we have some ideas here. Reused by the funders. Tools and use cases in practice that make life better for researchers. This could be also some of the topics for the hackathon if we decide to have one. Okay, good. I have to close the poll right now because we are running out of time. So thank you very much for participating in the meeting. In case you want to reach us, you can contact any of the chairs of the group. Participate in the recommendation adoption, spread the word. Please cite the recommendation whenever you use it. This is very important for us. And that's it for today. So see you at the next plenary, or hopefully sooner, or maybe in other workshops. And thank you to all the speakers who participated today.
Thank you.